This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Stevenson with his own move. Carrington. North are in front.
Hello, and welcome back to North Pod. We've won again. Another win, this time against the Suns. So in my podcasting time, our second win against the Suns. We've beaten the Suns twice and the Eagles once, but we're not going to worry about who we're beating. It's just good to win again. This time at Marvel, and it would have been great to not have to do it in a tight tussle at the end there. But beggars can't be choosers. It's our first win in Melbourne since round one of last year when we beat West Coast, and yeah, we're definitely not going to complain. We're happy with the win. It's great to grab the win, get off the bottom of the ladder, which is fantastic. Richmond lost for us on Saturday as well, so that helped keep them below us on the ladder. And all of a sudden, you know, the wheel's starting to turn. We've played a great month or so of football, had a couple of wins now, and obviously, you know, things are still not amazing. We're still second bottom, but I think we can start to see that potentially next year, if things continue the way that they are continuing, you know, things could be on the up, and we might be able to start heading towards, you know, that 11th, 12th, 13th kind of region where maybe winning one in every 3 games or something like that. You know, we're not there yet. We've got a ways to go, but I think there is hope that, you know, things are starting to turn. We probably thought this was happening last year at times, but we hadn't completely bottomed out and lost those players like Xerri and Cunnington and Aaron Hall, some of those older players that were holding us up a little bit, despite 2 or 3 of those players also being whipping boys towards the end of their careers. Anyway, just great to have a win. It was a fantastic day. Plenty of North fans in the crowd, which was fantastic. It felt like a sea of blue, which is so unusual going to a North Melbourne game to be definitively the most populous there. The only real Suns fans there were the cheer squad. It was North Melbourne everywhere else, and sure, it was, you know, 18,000. So it's a small crowd. We know that we're a small supporter base down the bottom of the ladder, so that's going to happen. But it did feel like, you know, I think I felt a little bit like how some of those bigger clubs might feel, just because of the fact that it was such a dominant North Melbourne crowd. It was virtually silent when the Suns kicked the goal, which is often the case for us if it's an away game. Let's look at team selection. Very consistent team selection at the moment. Fisher has a little bit of foot injury. It's part of the reason he got subbed out last week. And so he came out. Colby McKercher came back in. Colby had played a couple of games in the VFL and was looking fantastic. He came back in and did not skip a beat. We'll talk about him in a minute. So it was a like for like there with that sort of quarterback attacking defender position just being swapped out, which we love for consistency. We've had a fair bit of consistency at selection over the past month or so with really only needed changes happening. And then Curtis Taylor was the sub, which I think is fair. You know, he's definitely one of those fringe players. And as also, it brings a little bit of flexibility. He can play a half-forward role. He can play a wing role. He could potentially play a tagging role, which we saw him do a couple of times last year. So he does have that flexibility to do a couple of different things. And I think that's kind of what you want from a sub. And yeah, that was what we went in looking like. We're still going with the 3 talls down forward with Larkey, Teakle and Pink. And then Will Phillips kept his spot on the side. There was a bit of... I thought that potentially he'd play a tagging role on either Anderson or Rowell. And we'll talk about it. He didn't really appear to play a role on anyone specific. He seemed to just rotate through those and took Miller, a few of the different Suns mids, and still play a defensive role of sorts, but it wasn't that lockdown on one player role that we've seen him do in previous weeks. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to keep his spot on the side when Georgie Woodlaw comes back. That's something we can talk about later on in the podcast. Match result, North Melbourne win. That's right, you don't have to adjust your podcast app. North Melbourne win. North Melbourne 13-9-87 defeated the Gold Coast Suns 12-11-83. So a 4-point win. And I think story of the game, it's another one of those games where you can see our midfield is coming of age. We won it around the middle of the ground, and that allowed us to control possession of the ball. It didn't necessarily allow us to dominate sort of territory. It was still another one of those games where the ball spent a lot of time in the middle part of the ground with us struggling to transition it. But we certainly had more control of the ball. And a lot of that came about because of our midfielders and a little bit to do with our defence as well. We won the clearances 45-29, and that came mostly on the back of our clearance wins around the ground at stoppages. The centre clearances was relatively even. We just lost that. But around the ground, we really dominated, and that's obviously with Xerri, LDU, Powell, Simpkin was in there a lot this week. Sheezel at times. These sorts of players were fantastic. We ended up with 50 more disposals as a result. The contested possessions was relatively even. We just lost it, but we had more of the footy, and I think that's due to our mids being able to win it out, and unusually for us able to actually feed it out and give our midfielders some time and some space to make some good decisions. Like I said, Sheezel, LDU, Powell, Simpkin, Xerri were all fantastic around the contest, and we were just better at finding time and space. We were able to feed those handballs out to players running past and actually have a look going forward. And look, as per has been our challenge for the past 17 years, we did struggle to convert this dominance into sort of possessions in the final third of the ground. We got smashed in the inside 50 count at 46-62, so it did break down going forward, and it wasn't even the inside 50 kicks a lot of the time. It was often the kick before that or the possession before that where we just weren't able to find someone sort of 70 or 80 metres out from goal who could take a mark or who was free and was able to be that link in the chain, I suppose. So that was where we did struggle and why the inside 50 count didn't translate, or rather why the possessions and the contested situations dominance didn't translate to inside 50s so much as it did for the Suns. And let's be honest, the Suns have some great midfielders with Anderson and Rowell and Miller. The young ruckman Moyle did a fantastic job. I thought he worked really hard around the ground and made life for Xerri difficult. So yeah, I think that the area of the ground that we definitely need to work on the most out of this game is that connection between the midfielders and the forward line, and particularly those high half forwards when we're bringing the ball from the defensive part of the ground. It was different when we won it in the middle and we were able to get it straight into the forward line. It's when you bring it up the wing or even through the middle of the ground, but you've started in your defence, it was breaking down sort of in that wing to the inside to the forward 50 line. That region was where we struggled to find options. Whereas the Suns were pretty good at getting repeat inside 50s. That's where a lot of their inside 50s would come. We'd dump it out, we'd get it to the wing or so, and it would head back in because they'd taken a contested mark or, we just turned it over. So that's why why they had 16 more inside 50s. They were pretty good at getting repeats. But I think, like last week, our defence did a great job under duress to not collapse, to not wilter under all of that ball and under all that pressure, and that's what allowed us to, in the end, win by the 4 points because our defence stood up. And they weren't perfect by any means, but they did a great job of halving contests and not giving the Suns easy goals like we have given up, in the first part of the year. So I think, that's a broad summary of the game. It was a seesawing affair. Neither side was really able to grab momentum and hold on to it for long periods of time, but we were able to, in the second half, build a lead that eventually the Suns were unable to run down. They got close, don't get me wrong, we made it really nervous at the end, but we did get out to a 3-goal or so lead, and that meant that the Suns weren't quite able to reel that in the last quarter. So a win, which is, you cannot understate how important a win for this team at the moment is. It was fantastic. Great to have Sheezel playing his massive role. McKercher has his first win for the club because he missed the West Coast game with his foot injury. So a lot of positives to come out of the game for sure, and we'll talk about those as we go. Let's jump in and have a look at the 5 stars, and a lot of familiar names in this group. It was one of those weeks where it was a little bit tricky to make some final decisions, so I will talk about those players that were a little unlucky to miss out. But for me, it was an easy 4 stars decision. Harry Sheezel, 35 disposals, kicked a goal, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 10 clearances, which was the most on the ground, 5 inside 50s, and he was the difference maker. He was the one that was often handballing it out to the players on the outside, freeing the congestion and allowing our players some time and space to make a good decision. He's just so clean and composed and quick hands and good decisions. Like I could go on, but I think if you sat down and you watched his 35 disposals, you'd see that more often than not, he's picked up the ball, he's made a really quick decision, and that decision has given our teammates more time. And I think why it's so glaringly obvious is because we don't have many players who are capable of that. We've got a lot of players that can sort of pass the pressure down to someone else. And, that's understandable at AFL level. It's really hard to take that next step from being, AFL ready to being someone who looks super classy and a level above at the AFL level. And Shees has that. I think, I saw plenty on social media after the game about Shees, being a top 20 player in the AFL, and he's so much better than Harley Reid. A lot of the sort of hyperbole that we get excited about and we want to tell ourselves, what's happening. And I think possibly we need to cool our jets on a few of those things. But it's definitely not unreasonable to say that he could end up as a top 20 player in the AFL. He's playing like a top 50 player in the AFL at the moment, and that's why he looks so different and so amazing out there, because we obviously do lack mature talent. We've got some really great young talent, but we don't have too many players that are in the prime of their career and are stars. Like LDU is probably the one. Nick Larkey, if he was getting more ball, would be another. We don't have many. So Shees, because he's so young, only 19, and doing what he's doing, it's phenomenal. He was easily best on ground for me. I don't believe he's missed a set shot all year so far. He has kicked a point from open play, but kicked a great goal from around 50 metres out that gave us some great momentum in the third quarter. He's a phenomenal player, and I think as supporters we're all crying out for him to spend more time in the midfield and more time forward, and this is why I do think the coaches were right to mostly leave him at halfback last year, just to give him continuity and give him a chance to build some really strong foundations and confidence. And we know now that we can throw him down back for a bit if we need to, if the ball's spending a lot of time down there, but having him at the centre bounce and having him forward of the ball a little bit has been a real... I mean, it took him a couple of weeks to get the hang of it, and he's gone straight back to being in the best after, adjusting to that. So, phenomenal game from Shees. Can't wait to see what he can turn into. And I tweeted out after the game, I don't think we win or get close to winning without his input. Yeah, just phenomenal. The clearance work and the quick hands made a massive, massive difference. Then it got a little bit trickier for me to decide where, what the pecking order looks like, but I think pretty hard to go past Colby McKercher for the 3 votes. 37 disposals, most on the ground, 6 marks, 666 metres gained, 5 score involvements, and he did not miss a beat coming back in, replaced Fisher in that rebounding defender role, and had a near flawless game. Wasn't perfect, but pretty close. So many times he was involved in several possessions or disposals as the ball was transitioned up the ground. You can see our players look for him to give a hand pass to, because we trust his run and trust his disposal. And I mean, look, we have to go to the massive highlight that he produced. I can't remember exactly the start of it, but he was definitely involved in a disposal in defensive 50 and then ran on. Dylan Stephens ended up with the mark at halfback, gave the handball to McKercher on the way through, and he just ran around the end of the boundary line, took 4 bounces, probably one too many. He made the kick at the end really difficult because of his 4th bounce, but didn't matter. He hit Nick Larkey on the chest, who then went back and goaled. Goal assist of the year for mine. It had shades of Boomer Harvey. Boomer was also sometimes guilty of taking one too many bounces, but you had to respect it because you just loved to see it. And he didn't look like getting caught. He looked like he may have stepped out of bounds, like that was what the risk was. I don't think he did. I'm saying that was probably what might have happened if things got out of control. He could have potentially got pushed over the line, but he ran extremely hard, and then, he ran essentially from half back to half forward, and then hit an inside 50 kick to Larky in between two Suns. It was a massive, amazing highlight. You'll definitely see it on social media clips this week. It'll be hard to miss. If he'd kicked the goal, you'd see that in Goal of the Year nominations. But because it was assist, they don't have an Assist of the Year category. If they did, I think we'd have 2 nominations from this game, actually. I'll talk about the other one in a minute. But yeah, just a fantastic return game for him. It's going to be interesting to see what it looks like. Obviously, the first half of the year, we saw plenty of him and Fisher playing that rebounding, defending role. I just do think there's for me, we probably only need one of them there doing that role. I imagine Fisher comes back next week. I don't know that, but it might be worth having the 2 of them next week playing at the SCG. It is a smaller venue. It's harder to transition the ball there effectively. But yeah, McKercher is the one for me. He also had a couple of moments defensively where he absolutely tried his guts out and was able to halve a contest. There's one where he ran down a player that was going to put enough pressure on so that he missed. A couple of defensive efforts that, whilst he's not in there to be a defensive bull, it's not going to be, it's not his role. He's a smaller player. He obviously does have to defend at times, and I thought he did that better than Fisher has been able to do in the last little while at least. So, playing his part on both ends of the ground, and you saw that glimpse. We've seen a couple of his runs through the middle of the ground this year. This was definitely his most exciting, just because you wondered when it was going to stop, and it really didn't. It was a fantastic run, and super, super exciting for the future. 2 votes, I, again, found this one challenging, but I have had to give it to Tristan Xerri. 17 disposals, kicked a goal, 35 hit-outs, 13 of which were to advantage. 3 marks, 1 of them contested, 7 tackles, 6 clearances, 5 intercepts. He stacks the stats sheet like he does most weeks. I thought he won the ruck battle. He wasn't dominant in the ruck battle, but I thought his around the ground work was what sort of brought him up that next level. Particularly his intercept work. It's something that I think he has been working on this year. Is not necessarily marking it, but certainly getting into positions where he can oppose the opposition ruckman who's trying to take a mark on the wing, or run from the side of the contest and put on a big spoil. That's something that he's been able to do well recently, and I think that's what we need to see. We need to see the big man competing in the air. If you're going to be 200 plus centimetres, you need to be at least serviceable in the air, and I think Xerri is building towards that. He's been doing that for a couple of weeks, so I thought his ruck work was fantastic. His around the ground work was great. Kicked the goal, like I said, which is important. And you could see his confidence developing. He sold some hand candy in the middle of the ground at one point, balked a handball, and then freed himself up, gave himself some time to kick it inside 50, took a couple of handy marks, and as always, just a brute with his tackling. So Xerri continues to, smash expectations that were set for him at the start of the year. He was fantastic again, albeit playing on a really inexperienced ruckman in Ned Moyle, but you can only play who you come up against, and I thought that was a great contest to watch overall. A couple of really strong bullocking ruckmen. And then 1 vote, LDU's very unlucky to be down in the 1 vote area, but I couldn't not give him a vote. He had a fantastic game, and you could definitely mount an argument that he gets the 3 votes. I thought Sheezel was easily our best, but after that, you could really throw a blanket over several, and a couple more, to be honest. But LDU 1 vote, 30 disposals, 1 goal, 4 marks, 3 tackles, 9 clearances, 5 inside 50s, 7 score involvements, and yeah, I thought he was back to his usual self after a pretty quiet game in game 100 last week. He was back to his best, nearly kicked a goal of the year after a couple of bounces and shrugging of some tackles. Just faded on him and went through for a point. So it was a game of nearlies in some ways, but yeah, LDU was absolutely fantastic. All of his strengths were on show. He had that quick step ability to find some space where there really wasn't any. The 30 disposals and the clearance work was fantastic. The 7 score involvements is what we want to see from him. He's having impactful possessions that lead to goals for our team. And yeah, nearly kicked 2 goals, which is one of those things. Like both he and Simpkin, I would love if they could add some goal kicking to their repertoire. Neither of them have been big goal kickers over their career, but if they can be averaging 0.9 or 0.8 of a goal per game, end up with 20 or so for the year, I think that would be a massive success. So he's kicked goals in recent weeks, and another one for his tally, nearly had 2. Just another fantastic contested game from him. And similar to Sheezel, he was one of the reasons that other players were able to find space because of his class and his ability to sort of have the game slow down a little bit for him. So great that he could bounce back after a quieter game last week. In terms of who's unlucky to miss out, I mean, like I said, there's several here. I thought Simpkin probably had one of his best games for the year. He was fantastic. 28 disposals and didn't butcher it going forward by foot like he sometimes has been known to do. Had a couple of good kicks inside 50. So he was probably our third best midfielder, Simpkin. But that's behind LDU and Sheezel. So by no means is that a slight on him. Larkey was important but quiet. He kicked his 3 goals, so took advantage of the opportunities that came his way, but probably needed to do a little bit more or kick one more if he was able to, if he's going to get himself into the top 4. But 3 goals from an otherwise pretty quiet performance is fantastic. Charlie Comben, if I was just judging him on the first 3 quarters, probably gets a vote or 2, but he found it tough in the first quarter, and I'll talk about that. Sam Day really took him to the cleaners at the start of the game, but I thought as it went on, he intercepted better, and he played a pretty good game after quarter time. Chom. Jackson Archer, not a standout, but was really good defensively. He's one that Shan said should probably be in the votes, and I said, oh, look, we'll see. He was really great defensively, did another couple of good things, just not his best game, but a really good game. And even Tommy Powell, who's probably our next best midfielder, didn't quite have the volume of disposals. He spent a lot of time forward as well. I think he had 22 disposals, but did great stuff with every disposal. And the thing that I alluded to earlier, he was our other massive assist. Just kicked a barrel off half back, not because it was a quick kick. He saw that the space was out the back. That allowed Larkey and Liam Shields to run to it. It bounced up to Shields, and he tried his best to miss it, but did kick the goal out the back. So Tommy Powell's probably unlucky. It's one of his better games since the first part of the year. He was running hot at the start of the year. He's quietened down a little bit since then, but probably his best game in a little while for Tommy Powell. So he is also worth a shout. Had a fantastic game. Not just that barrel, but also his working around the ground. He was super effective with his disposals. Didn't waste them, and I'll talk about another part of his game a little bit later. In terms of the best opposition player, look, Rowell and Anderson were really damaging in the midfield, as they always are, but I think I've got to give it to Sam Day. He went off at 3/4 time with a hamstring injury, I believe, so only played the 3 quarters, but in that, 11 disposals, 2 goals, 1, 8 marks, 6 of them contested, and 7 score involvements. He was a massive aerial challenge. Like I mentioned, Chom really struggled on him in the first quarter. He got outmarked several times, and early on it looked like we were going to have a massive problem with Sam Day, who, going in you think maybe King's going to cause us a massive trouble, or potentially it's Rowell and Anderson in the midfield, or Took Miller. But yeah, Sam Day was the one causing us a lot of issues aerially. Took some fantastic marks inside 50 and also a little bit further up the ground as well. And yeah, if he hadn't gone off at 3/4 time, maybe it's a different game. His impact did diminish across the game, but early on he was just clunking them, and it was a real problem. So I thought he was the one that had the potential to take the game away from us. Anderson was a little bit ineffective with his disposal, and Rowell was quieter. So it was hard to pick. And honestly, if the Suns had won the game, I still think we would have had probably the best 3 players on the ground. Anyway, I'll give it to Sam Day, but you could probably argue it was Matt Rowell as well. In terms of the standings, the top 3 have not changed, and I've been saying it for a little while now. I think they're pretty set in stone. Sheezel, 30 votes, sits atop the North Podium. LDU, 25 in second place, and then closing on him, Tristan Xerri, 24. So there's the very clear top 3. And then underneath them, Tommy Powell and Charlie Comben on 10, Kirch has moved up the ladder a little bit. He's on 9 alongside Wardlaw on 9 and Zerha on 8. That rounds out the top 8. And yeah, Sheezel, LDU and Xerri sitting on top of there and looking absolutely fantastic at the moment. You know what time it is? Just a quick call to action. Please help me get the word out about the podcast. Share me with any North Melbourne fans that you know. Would be a massive help also if you can subscribe on your chosen podcast service and leave me a review on Apple or Spotify. If you can, it really helps me or helps the podcast surface to some other people. And you can get involved with my social media at NorthPod Show, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. Another way for you to support the show is at Buy Me a Coffee, or I like to call it Buy Me a Coke. That's at buymeacoffee.com/NorthPodShow. It's just another way for you to support me and support the show. And I really appreciate those people that do so. I've got a couple of people to thank this week. And I remember this one. I'm not certain how to pronounce it. I'm going to say Rusoet118. A repeat supporter. Thank you so much for the 10 Cokes. I really appreciate it. Like I said, a repeat supporter and someone who I'm often having a chat with on social media. So thank you for the support. And also thank you to Arnie for the 3 Cokes. You covered my intake for my recent trip away. And I thank you so much, Arnie, for your support as well. So if you would like to get a shout out, feel free to head to the show notes, find the Buy Me a Coffee link, and I thank everyone for their support. And that just includes getting involved with the show, listening, commenting, all of those things. It all helps, and I really appreciate everyone's input and support. So let's go to the negatives. We start there always. Even though it's a win, we are going to start with the negatives. And I alluded to it earlier. Charlie Comben really struggled on Sam Day, particularly early. I thought Chom got better as the game went on, but he got outmarked several times and got caught out of position when he was being forced to defend one-on-one. You'll see when the ball is up inside our 50, Chom is the free player, sort of hanging around the middle of the ground, waiting for that Suns play that's going to go deepest. And he will generally grab them when the opportunity arises, but he doesn't get sucked into the contest even if his man goes further up. So when he gets forced to defend one-on-one, that's when he looks the most vulnerable. It makes sense. He's a young defender. I think we saw, how young he is today. Day really threatened in quarter one to take the game away from us, and thankfully Chom adjusted and was able to go for more of a conservative game from that point on. He still had some fantastic intercept marks, but I thought also made some better decisions about when to spoil as the game went on. So it's great to see that adjustment within the game. And it's a big reminder of how young he is in the role. So whilst it's a negative, I think we can look at it from a positive lens as well, in that he adjusted, he got better, he wasn't perfect, but I thought, the first quarter just showed. There's been some talk in the media about, oh my goodness, Chom is a 1-for-1 replacement for someone like Mackay. I know he doesn't play the same way as Mackay, but just in terms of having a defender of height there, and Mackay had 7 or 8 years of experience, and so whilst we're certainly paying Chom less than we would have been paying Mackay, we have to take the hit in experience and acknowledge that. Like it or love it, Mackay had some things that he could do and some things that he couldn't. This is just the price to pay for the lack of experience, I guess is what I'm saying. Chom will come through and be an amazing player for us, I think, but there are going to be games like this where he needs to learn, and I think he did learn in this game, which is all you want from him in this role. Another one that I alluded to earlier, balls forward to the centre were an issue. There was a lot of long kicks to no one in particular in the forward line, which allowed Collins and Andrew easy intercepts. Some of those kicks seem to be designed directly for the Suns players, which is frustrating. It was particularly bad in the last quarter when we were trying to protect the lead and the structure of the forward line kind of loosened and there wasn't as much, or weren't as many of our players forward the ball. We just seemed to really find it easy to hit the Suns players on the chest rather than North Melbourne teammates. So that's something that we need to work on those short diagonal kicks, or chaining out better with handballs, finding options as opposed to just bombing it long and hoping with the 3 tools up there, you're a better chance if you're going for a bomb at long. But I think you've got to have our players expecting that. You can't just kick it high and hope that they're going to get there. We did see Teakle take a contested mark. We know that Curtis and Xerri, if they're on, can play a great crumbing role or even mark it if it's a smaller pack. But I don't think that's the way we want to be playing most of the time. Larky's a marker on the lead player. And yeah, I just don't... That's why he had... Or part of why he had such a quiet game, I think, is that we weren't playing to his strengths or the Suns weren't allowing us to do so. Collins also played a great game on Larky, so there's a couple of different factors there. But yeah, just the connection between the mids and the forward line is something that I think we'll need to continue to work on. A perfect example of this was late in the game. Eddie Ford's running forward. I think he took maybe a bounce and just picked the third of 2 options. Kicked it straight between the 2 North Melbourne players, hit the Suns defender in the middle of the ground. He tried to centre Eddie Ford, so he'd done the unselfish thing, but just didn't have that connection. And I think, yeah, that's something for us to work on, because we've got a couple of those high half forward or half forward types that are just inconsistent at the moment. Zerha's been great in the last month or so, but he had an off game. Eddie Ford's had a couple of off games now. He kicked 2 points in this one, and like I said, made a couple of mistakes. So just that synergy with the mids and the high forwards and what that looks like going forward is something to continue building. I think across the other areas of the ground, some consistency in those positions has been super helpful, and we've had a couple of players moving through half forward with Jaden Stevenson and Zane Dersma. Obviously, our taller forwards have come in and out. We tried Sellers for a little while there. We had Coleman Jones at the start of the year before his injury. So potentially now with a bit more consistency, things might change. But look, we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't mind seeing a couple of different players in the late part of the season now. Potentially Blake Xerri could come back in. Cooper Harvey we haven't seen at AFL level all year. And probably more tellingly, I'd love to see Zane Dersma play at the back end of the year. So I think consistency is great, but I still wouldn't mind seeing some experimentation. So good luck with that match selection committee. But yeah, I just think it's worth noting that synergy is lacking a little bit. I think the obvious negative to talk about is, sure, we won, and it was, of course, it's great to win, but we did give the Suns the chance to win it. Ainsworth missed a shot that would have put them 1 point up with a minute or so left. It was a tricky set shot. He was kicking from range, but certainly gettable. Shortly before that, they had kicked a goal, which had brought the margin back to 5 points. So we allowed them a couple of pretty easy clearances, centre clearances, to get in those positions to kick those goals. And when the ball comes in quickly like that, it's hard to argue or hard to point the finger at the defence, because if the ball's coming in that fast, at times it's just a 50-50, or you get slightly beaten on the lead, and if it's a good kick, there's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, I think that's something to work on in terms of how we defend the leads. We did a better job than we have in other games, but I also think the opposition in this game was not as good as, say, in the Collingwood game where we got ran down. There's definitely some work for us to do in protecting the leads when we shift into game preservation mode. Like I said, our forward line structure seemed to completely disappear midway through the last quarter, and I just don't think we can have that, because that allowed the opposition so many opportunities to rebound and then get the ball fast into their forward line, which is how they ended up kicking a couple of goals. So we definitely need to work on our setup when we're trying to preserve the game, and potentially we're not throwing as many behind the ball as we did yesterday. We also just need to spend a little bit more time figuring out how we set up defensively at set of bounces late in the last quarter if we're ahead, because like I said, they got a couple of clearances that were pretty clean and allowed them those opportunities. So look, we won the game. It's not something that you're going to lose sleep about, but if we're going to win more games in the future, I think that's something we need to work on, is figuring out what our structures look like in those late game scenarios if we're ahead, and also what it looks like if we're behind. And then the last quick negative, just Paul Curtis, something we've talked about before, needs to keep working on his lack of discipline. Gave away a really silly free kick when he was getting frustrated. Potentially he was being held, and you don't know what's happened leading up to that, but I just would like to see him sort of work towards stamping those lack of discipline scenarios out of his game, because he's got an extremely high free kick against count, and a lot of that is to do with the fact that he is prone to losing his temper slightly or making poor decisions. So he did kick the sealer, so I'll forgive him in this game. He kicked a great goal to seal the game for us, but that's just a little nitpick that he is to continue to work on in his game. Positives. I think the obvious one for me is the ball movement did look a lot easier with McKercher at fullback than it has recently. Like I mentioned, it got stuck further up the ground, but I think we did a great job of getting it out of defensive 50 and then sort of onto the wing. And then, sometimes McKercher just took the ball and ran the whole way anyway, and we didn't need to find those link-up players. But it was less of Chom kicking short, less of players just bombing it out without looking. There was still a bit of that, and there's still a time and place for that, but I thought McKercher made some great decisions coming out of defensive 50 and made that quote-unquote North ball look a little bit better than it has since the start of the year, to be honest. His run and carry was fantastic, and yeah, obviously we're probably looking for Kirch to end up being a midfielder. There's so many comparisons to Zach Merritt that have been put out there. I think he's going to end up as a mid, but right now we really need a player like him and a player that is him playing off halfback and giving us that run and carry from deep defensive 50. And if he's able to do a bit of defensive work as well, fantastic. I think everyone else did their role there, which allows Kirch to have the most responsibility with distributing, like Luke McDonald shutting down or trying to. Darcy Tucker did a little bit of that as well. Core and Chom and Callan Dawson are playing defensive roles, although Core doesn't mind a bit of offensive work as well. And Core, I didn't mention him, or I haven't mentioned him yet. I thought he had a really good game on King. Beaten in the lead a couple of times, but aside from that, I thought he was fantastic. So anyway, yeah, Kirch, the ball movement looked a bit better with Kirch in the side. We've got to work on the ball movement a bit further up the ground, but in terms of getting it from full back to the wing, I thought this was the best it had looked in several weeks. Another positive, getting 3 goals out of Toby Pink and Bryn Teakle is fantastic output given, the sort of players they are and what we can expect from them, I think. So Pink kicked a goal from a snap and Teakle kicked 2 set shot goals. And yeah, the fact that we're able to get 3 from them when really they're just trying to create some more space for Nick Larkey and create some more contests at ground level is fantastic. Teakle was marking it well. Pink tried his best to take the Suns' dangerous interceptors out of dangerous positions. So often Mac Andrew was following Pink, and that allowed Pink to try and take him out of the area. So that neither of them are going to be high possession players, but so long as they are playing that role where they're making life a little bit easier for Nick Larkey, they're kicking a goal now and then, and they're also competing in the air. That's what we need from them. Teakle also needs to be able to relieve Tristan Xerri in the ruck, which he was able to do fine this week. He's not an amazing ruckman, but he absolutely competes and gets the job done for small parts of the game, and it also means that Nick Larkey doesn't need to be doing that, which I think is fantastic. Unless the ball's really deep inside 50, I don't mind Larkey taking sort of a boundary throw in that context, but I don't really want to see Nick Larkey in the middle of the ground taking ruck contests, which he hasn't been since Teakle's come into the side, or really even since Pink's come into the side as a forward. But yeah, I just think it's great that we could have 3 goals from those players. It allows Larkey to kick 3 as well. I'm certainly open to experimenting with someone other than Pink. Like maybe that's where Zane Dersma comes back in. He's obviously a little bit smaller than Pink and plays a little bit differently, but I'm definitely open to that. I think Teakle's important because he's able to do the second rucking, but I'm happy with Pink's game at the moment. So long as Pink is allowing Nick Larkey some more time and space and spreading the defence a little bit, I think it's a success. And if he's able to hit the scoreboard like he was today, that's a bit of a bonus for me. So not saying that either of them were absolutely sensational, but I think they played their role. Another positive, and this is a really low-hanging fruit one, you cannot put a price on winning. Some of the highlights were amazing. The feeling at the ground was fantastic. I've mentioned most of these things, but Tommy Powell's barrel out of half-back to Shields, phenomenal. Just the vibes at the crowd, the amazement, to be honest, at how well he'd nailed that torp. Kircher's solo run and kick to Larkey, absolutely fantastic. And thank goodness that Larkey was able to finish that goal. It's always deflating when something amazing like that happens and then the finishing touches aren't quite there. So that was fantastic. Some great defensive efforts throughout to create contests as well from Kirch. Aiden Core just selling candy like he has been for the last little while. He dropped 2 plays in a row and was able to find some space in the back pocket. Tristan Xerri was selling some hand candy. I talked about him. But I guess all of this is to say that you can see the confidence building in the group based on the last month or so. And I think then getting the reward with the win really franks that and allows the players to keep building that belief. Yeah, just the confidence from some of those younger players in particular, like Powell and McKercher, like Xerri is a young ruckman. You can see that confidence building, and it's not what we saw in the first part of the year. It's fantastic to see, and I think the big difference in this game is you could see that the players actually believe that we could win, and I think that's what winning that game in Perth kind of allows you to do it. It gives you confidence that you can do it, whereas before that, we hadn't won really in a competitive game since round 2 of the year before, because the win against Gold Coast last year, it was a great win, don't get me wrong, but it was the deadest of rubbers. Whereas this game, the Suns are still in the hunt for the top 8 at the moment. This was well and alive for them. And so it's a definitive win. Sure, the Suns have been awful travelling this year, so there's form there, but we had to do the job of winning and we put ourselves in front. And I think another win's just going to hopefully create more belief, and then you never know what can happen in the next 7 weeks. Footy's a funny game. Anything could happen. The final positive, and I've mentioned him now a couple of times, I think Tommy Powell needs to be kicking the ball inside 50 more than he has been. He had that massive taunt, but he had a couple of other great kicks inside 50 as well. And I think that's the sign, that's the sort of the player that you want at kicking inside 50. I've mentioned that Will Field's a great kick inside 50. Unfortunately, he didn't have a lot of it in this game. He had a pretty quiet game, so it's hard for him to be doing so. But Tommy Powell, some of his kicks inside 50 were fantastic. So just another positive, and adds something else to his game in terms of, we know that he's a ball winner. We know that he's got a great handball. And I think seeing him being able to find targets inside 50 by foot that's what's going to keep him in the side. I think he's certainly ahead of Will Field in terms of the midfield pecking order, but he does also spend more time forward because he's a bit more flexible of a player. So if he's playing a high half forward role, kind of what we were trying to do with Jai at the start of the year, I don't mind that if that means that he's kicking it inside 50, because he was fantastic in this game against the Suns, and I hope to see more of that side of his game. I think that's going to do us for the match roundup, and this next segment's going to be relatively quick because there was no VFL this week. It's a bye for the VFL side, so nothing to talk about from the reserves. They are sitting just outside the finals or the playoff positions for the VFL with 6 weeks left to go, so hopefully they are able to make that at least the first week of finals. It's good to have everyone playing for as long as possible in terms of your seniors and your reserves. The AFL does go for a week or so longer than the VFL, so if we could still be playing VFL footy in the last round of the AFL, that'd be great. But the VFL side is going to need to get a few wins to make that happen. In terms of other news from the week, not a lot other than 2 re-signings. So Jackson Archer and Braden George have both re-signed until the end of 2026. So that's 2 years past this year. And for both of them, different reasons. Jackson Archer, his form has been fantastic in the second half of the year. So to reward him with a 2-year extension, I think is fantastic. Whereas Braden George, obviously super, super disappointing that he has done his knee in the reserves. He spent a big part of this year trying to get himself ready. It's a devastating blow for him. So it's great that we've given him 2 years from the end of this year to kind of get his body right and show what he can do. Look, who knows what's going to happen. It's really hard with players like this when they've got significant injuries that is obviously going to take away from their athletic capacity. We know that Braden also missed a lot of his footy in his draft year as a result of a knee injury as well. He's just missing a lot of footy, unfortunately. So we've shown the faith in him and we've done the right thing by him to give him a chance to get his body right and show what he can do. And we'll see what happens from there. I think we just have to adjust our expectations of him a little bit now based on the fact that athletically he's not going to be quite the player that he should be and he would be. And he's also missed a lot of footy. So he's got, 2 years and change now to get it right. You'd think that most of next year he's probably not going to play. But 2026, hopefully he's able to show what he can do and potentially get reward for us, backing him in up to that point. In terms of next week, we have our third consecutive Saturday 1:45 game, this time at the SCG in Sydney, and we're playing Sydney, so, they are obviously a really, really informed side at the moment. Coming off the back of a surprising loss last week to Freo. As I'm recording this, they haven't played yet. They're playing the Saints on Sunday this week, so that hasn't happened yet. You'd expect the Swans to beat the Saints, but look, you never know. Anything can happen. From our perspective, I just hope that we go in and we're competitive. Now that we're in 17th, I think it'd be great if we could stay off 17th for the rest of the year. We do play Richmond. We haven't played them yet, so we do play them in a month or so. So that's an opportunity to really cement our spot above them. But for now, we just need to be competitive in games so that our percentage doesn't plummet when we're able to stay off the bottom. In terms of what could happen, look, Wardlaw's going to come back in. He's missed his 2 weeks for his concussion, so probably you're looking at someone like Wilfield or Taylor or Dylan Stevens or Liam Shields coming out. Wilfield is the most like-for-like there. They're very similar players in terms of their position. I mean, Wardlaw is a very different player to Wilfield, but positionally they're most alike. Those other 3 I listed are more like wings or players that can go to half forward. So, look, we'll see what happens, but Wardlaw is definitely going to come back in. Potentially, Sydney is a super, super strong midfield. They've got some great inside and outside players. So we'll see what happens, but that's kind of what I'm expecting. Given the VFL had a bye, I'm not sure if Griffin Logue's going to come back in or if maybe he plays one more in the VFL next week. Who knows? And I also have no idea who he replaces for what it's worth, because those 3 taller defenders in Dawson, Chom and Core are all doing mostly their part. Maybe it's Aiden Core that comes out. Maybe it's Callan Dawson. I can't see it being Chom. So I'm not sure what happens with that. That's a great discussion for match committee. I also can't see us playing all 4 of them unless we came up against a super, super tall side, which I don't think is going to be Sydney. Even if Amati and McDonald are playing, that's only 2 big tools up there. So that's something to watch. Maybe this is where Callan or Chom miss out for this year, but moving forward, someone like Core's missing out. I don't know. I really don't. But it's great to have selection problems like this because it means things are going well for us and we're getting players back fit and players are playing well. But yeah, I think that's going to do us for the podcast for this week. I hope that you enjoyed the big win. I certainly did. It was just relief again for me. I'm not able to fully celebrate. It's not really, I'm not a big celebrator. I am thank God we won that at this point. But hopefully when things start to turn and we're winning more often, I'm able to let loose a little bit more. But it's certainly a much better feeling to win than to go away having lost a close one again. We've lost too many of those close ones over the last year and a half or so. So I hope that you were able to enjoy it a little bit more than I was. I hope that you have a great week. Stay warm. It's very, very cold here in Melbourne. I'll talk to you hopefully after a competitive game against Sydney. And only 7 weeks to go in this home and away season. It goes super, super fast every year. I don't know where it goes. Have a great week. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.